Hygiene of Foodstuffs, Guides to Good Hygiene Practice, states that every person working in food handling areas must maintain a high degree of personal cleanliness and wear suitable clean and, where appropriate, protective clothing. Personal cleanliness includes hygiene practices, and the onus is on a proprietor to ensure compliance. Staff selection. Requirements for food handlers include clean and tidy appearance, absence of skin infection, clean hands, short fingernails, no signs of nail biting, absence of excess personal jewellery and makeup, a belief in the importance of hygiene, and the willingness to attend food safety training. With pre-employment medical screening, applicants should complete a medical questionnaire, and suspect carriers should have to provide specimens. Return to work forms. Food handlers visiting countries where serious foodborne diseases such as typhoid are endemic should complete return to work forms. Forms may be completed when off work through sickness. Medical clearance may be required if the form reveals possible risks to food, for example, potential carrier status. The aim of this unit is to provide an understanding of the need for high standards of personal hygiene and the knowledge to control and monitor staff. Learning outcomes. By the end of this module, you should be able to define the role of management in securing high standards of personal hygiene and preventing contamination of food, stating why training is so important, identifying what to look for with medical screening of staff, and to give reasons why protective clothing is so important. Food handlers are the sources and causes of hazards, especially with contaminated hands, where food handlers are ill, especially with diarrhea and vomiting, if they have any boils or septic cuts and abrasions, poor hygiene practices, wearing dirty, contaminated clothing, and wearing jewellery. Hand washing is essential to prevent contamination, and we'll look at hand washing later on. The role of the supervisor is, first of all, to make sure that staff wash their hands and instruct staff, demonstrate and supervise. They must lead by example. They must ensure that soap, hot water, a clean nail brush and suitable drying facilities are always available. Food handlers with open boils and septic lesions must be excluded from the food area. Staphylococcus aureus is the main problem here. Waterproof dressings, preferably blue, must cover cuts, etc. Loose dressings must be replaced immediately. And also consider the use of waterproof finger stalls and gloves. And a quick note on the use of disposable gloves. Even when you wear gloves, even the latex type, you can cross-contaminate wearing gloves all day without changing them. So make sure you have a good glove changing regime throughout the day. If disposable gloves are worn for handling high-risk food, the hands must be washed thoroughly before putting on the gloves and after taking them off. The gloves must be replaced immediately if damaged, and the gloves should be discarded once removed, for example after breaks or leaving the food room. And the reasons why food handlers should not smoke, and the reason why it is illegal, is because bacteria is transferred from lips to hands to food and via saliva to work surfaces. It also encourages coughing. There's a risk of physical contamination from cigarette ends or ash, and it provides an unpleasant atmosphere which could promote other people to cough over food and any preparation of food. And as far as first aid is concerned, you must ensure staff are aware of the need for coloured waterproof dressings and to report losses. Loose dressings to be replaced. Ensure staff know where to obtain dressings and the procedure in the event of accidents, and ensure there's an adequate provision of first aid materials. Effective hand washing. Regulation EC 852/2004 on the hygiene of foodstuffs states that an adequate number of wash basins must be available. They must be suitably located and designated for cleaning hands only. They must be provided with hot and cold running water, materials for cleaning the hands and for hygienic drying. Where necessary, they must be separate from food sinks. Surveys have indicated that the cases of diarrhea and vomiting and even colds can be reduced by up to 50% if staff wash their hands when necessary and properly. Hand washing is particularly important on the following occasions: after entering a food room or preparation area, before handling food, visiting the toilet, especially when using toilet paper. Some cultures do not use toilet paper, and this should be addressed in training. After changing or putting on a dressing, especially a boil or septic cut. Cleaning up dog dirt, for example guide dogs, guard dogs, and other animal fecal material. Handling a soiled nappy, which may be left in the toilet. Dealing with an ill person who's vomiting or diarrhea. After handling raw food, especially meat, poultry or soily vegetables, before handling ready-to-eat food. And after handling external packaging contaminated with, say for example, bird droppings. And the best way for hand washing on the above occasions is to use the double hand wash system. Pioneered by a Dr. John Snyder in the States, it's basically washing your hands twice. First of all, starting with warm running water. The temperature really is irrelevant to killing bacteria, it's mainly for comfort purposes. Too hot, you could scald your hands; too cold, and you don't want to wash your hands. You should also have liquid soap from a non-refillable container, so a disposable container of liquid soap, because if you use the refillable containers, over a time you will get a build-up of mould inside the container. And it's far preferable to use disposable liquid soap than bar soap, because bar soap, again, left in a food room, in a kitchen, in a toilet, you will get a build-up of mould growth on there. You will also need a soft nylon bristle nail brush. And the idea is really to, first of all, start off with warm running water into a hand wash sink. No stopper in the sink so the water runs straight through. Build up a lather in your hands, and then wash the backs of the hands, front of the hands, between the fingers and thumbs, and expose parts of the arms, wrists thoroughly. Then use the nail brush, then build a bit of a lather up on the nail brush and do the backs and the fronts of the fingernails, and then swill off under warm water, and then repeat the process again. So that's what we call a double hand wash system. If your hands are lightly soiled, say after touching your hands, your face, your nose, etc., then a single wash system could be adopted, but you must spend at least 20 seconds in washing your hands in the single wash system. So a single wash system could be used once you've touched your hair, nose or face, after smoking, eating, coughing, sneezing or blowing your nose, and after cleaning. Also after handling waste or refuse containers, after handling money or soiled cloths, after handling external packaging, plants or flowers, and after touching a contaminated surface. Really, it's up to you to gauge how contaminated or soiled your hands are. It might be the best rule of thumb to use a double hand wash system in or on each event. And bacteria removed during hand washing, there's a reduction of 1,000 to 1 by just brushing the fingertips under running water. There's a reduction from 100 to 1 by rubbing hands vigorously with liquid soap and rinsing under running water. And there's a reduction from 100 to 1 with drying with a paper towel. You must always dry your hands after washing, don't leave them damp or wet. And the best way to do that is with, as I just mentioned, a paper towel. The electric hand dryers, they are not very effective. They take too long to dry the hands, and you'll end up just wiping your hands in your overalls. And also they do generate a lot of heat, and so you could get a build of bacteria within the vicinity. And the roller towels, they are not very efficient at all. You'll find they tend to jam 9 times out of 10, so you could be wiping your hands into an infected part on the towel. So for hand washing, the best products to use are a neutral liquid soap and water. Don't be tempted to use alcoholic gel, which if used constantly can give rise to dermatitis, and also it can defat the hands and cause a lot of damage. and it's not very effective if your hands are greasy or dirty, because it won't penetrate the biofilms on the skin where the bacteria might be living underneath. And also, the idea of washing your hands is to reduce the bacteria by flushing them away and not by killing them. If we start looking at killing bacteria, you could end up killing the good bacteria which is there to protect your hands, because alcoholic gel and bactericides are not very discriminate. Also, with bactericidal soap, the bactericide takes at least 2 minutes to become effective and kill bacteria. And as the single hand wash system only takes about 20 seconds, you're literally flushing the bactericide into the environment. And then that chemical will be responsible for killing all natural flora and fauna in the environment. Protective clothing. The idea of protective clothing is to protect the product you're dealing with from your contamination, not the other way around. It's not to prevent you from splashes and spillages from the product you're dealing with. Protective clothing could come in the guise of hairnets, hats, jackets, trousers, shoes, etc. You need to consider when to remove protective clothing. For example, travelling to work, travelling to town to do some shopping, visiting a canteen, visiting a toilet. You should be a procedure laid down for the changing of protective clothing, the use of colour coding perhaps, the use of light or dark coloured protective clothing, the use of pressed studs, velcro or buttons, home laundering or in-house laundering, the use of long or short sleeves, the use of hairnets, snoods and hats. Remember, if you've got buttons, that increases the possibility of physical contamination. If you don't have pockets, then staff are not going to be tempted to keep items in the pockets, which again could act as physical contaminants. From a health and safety point of view, you need to consider using thick overalls to protect against heat, the use of loose clothing in the case of boiling water spillage, the use of stout non-slip shoes, waterproof aprons, and protective head covering if you're in a factory environment. Under the regulation EC 852/2004 on the hygiene of foodstuffs, adequate changing facilities for personnel must be provided where necessary. Food handlers should also wear suitable clean and, where necessary, protective clothing. It's also recommended in the industry guides to catering, provision should be required to change and store street clothes and personal effects away from open foods. Notification and exclusion of visitors and staff. A medical questionnaire should be completed and assessed before starting work. Regulation EC 852/2004 on the hygiene of foodstuffs states that food handlers must advise the food business operator if they are a carrier of or suffering from a foodborne disease or have an infected wound, skin infection, sore throat or diarrhea, which may contaminate food with pathogens. They must not be permitted to handle food or enter a food handling area if there is any risk of contamination. And there are several actions a supervisor may take. First of all, to exclude from the food service if there is a risk of contamination, whether it's direct or indirect. To transfer staff to low risk work, for example, if they're a carrier but no symptoms. They may ask the staff to see a doctor to give samples. They may advise the environmental health practitioners, and they can decide then if normal duties are to be resumed when medical clearance is obtained. Under the Department of Health Guidelines 1995, where it states food handlers' fitness to work, requirements for return to work following gastrointestinal infection includes no vomiting for 48 hours, bowel habit normal for 48 hours, and good hygiene practice, particularly hand washing, is observed in all circumstances. In other words, if you're symptom free for 48 hours or more, you are entitled to return to work under these guidelines, although an employer might decide to send you along to a doctor's to take any samples just in case you are a carrier. There are certain criteria for return to work when suffering from certain serious foodborne diseases. For example, typhoid and paratyphoid. There must be 6 consecutive negative specimens taken 1 week apart, starting 3 weeks after completion of antibiotic treatment. Note well, there's a 5% chance of the next specimen being positive. VTEC E. coli 0157. Until the bowel habit is normal for 48 hours and 2 negative fecal samples at 48-hour intervals are given, then a person suffering with E. coli 0157 should not be allowed back to work. The most important barrier to passing on infection is thorough hand washing. As there is up to a 10% chance that the next specimen will be positive, carriers who cannot be relied on to wash hands properly should not be allowed to work as food handlers. People suffering from hepatitis A, they can be let back to work 7 days after the onset of symptoms, which is usually jaundice. Staphylococcus aureus or streptococci, anyone with scaling, weeping or discharging lesions on an exposed part of the skin which cannot be adequately covered should cease food handling work until healed. And these are the recommendations of the PHLS Salmonella Subcommittee 1995 and updated 2004. And Staphylococcus aureus and streptococci in this case are not a foodborne disease but a food poisoning disease. The objectives and benefits of hygiene training. Training is the process of bringing a person to an agreed standard of proficiency by practice and instruction, i.e. more than attending a course. Competency is required. The objectives of training: it changes attitudes positively to food hygiene and it minimises the risks. The benefits include: it assists in the production of safe food, reduces food wastage, reduces complaints, higher staff morale with pride in job, increases job satisfaction. It contributes to increased productivity, ensures all correct procedures are followed, helps comply with legal requirements, complies with industry guides and codes of practice, promotes good company image, improves supervisory skills of managers, and reduces the amount of supervision required. It's crucial to maintain detailed training records for all staff. This will allow some forward planning, and management should be able to ascertain if a member of staff is trained to an appropriate level when an emergency occurs. It's also useful to support a due diligence defence, but it's also crucial with your HACCP records. One of the main documents to retain in your food safety management system based on HACCP principles are the training records. Again, that would act as a due diligence defence should the company have to go to court. The legal requirement for training is covered by our old friend Regulation EC number 852/2004 on the hygiene of foodstuffs, and it states that the food business operator shall ensure that food handlers are supervised and instructed and or trained in food hygiene matters commensurate with their work activity, and it's all about competency, not certification. That word commensurate means the training should be equal to the job that they're undertaking. The industry guides to catering states that a food handler is any person involved in a food business who handles or prepares food, whether packaged or unopened, and includes drink and ice. All staff should be properly supervised and instructed. Greater supervision is required for new staff awaiting formal training, also staff handling high-risk foods, and less experienced staff. Training methods could include on-the-job instruction, in-house or external courses, approved courses to provide underpinning knowledge, not competency, reinforcement, demonstrations, group exercises, role-playing, quizzes. They're all effective techniques. Computer-based training, or CBT for short, is available 24 hours per day. Remember, the more people actually do, the more they remember. Training aids could include books, videos, CD-ROMs, DVDs, posters, acetates, and interactive training packages. Spot the fault, for example. Remember the acronym EDIT as regards training. Explain, demonstrate, involve and test, and that equals competency. Supervisors can determine if training has been understood and good practice is implemented by discrete observation and completing competency testing cards, and also by on-the-job questions. Training provides knowledge which underpins competency. Certification is not the same as proficiency. If food handlers have, for example, a food safety certificate but do not implement and practice what they've been taught, then they will not comply with legal requirements. A training program should consist of several elements. First of all, induction training, which is essential for all food handlers prior to starting work. So before they start work, induction training. Awareness, which includes monitoring CCPs. This should be undertaken within 1 month of starting. Next, introduction to hazard analysis, or the food safety management system, based on now, since the 1st of January 2006, based on the 7 HACCP principles. The next one, foundation level. This is for high-risk food handlers within 3 months of starting the job. Now with the CIEH, they have just changed their qualifications, so this foundation level is now the level 2 award in food safety in either catering, manufacturing or retail. All supervisors should attain the intermediate level or the new level 3 award. All managers should attain the level 4 award or the advanced level. Practice and implementation of the training should be supervised. Reinforcement could be obtained by notices, on-the-job instruction and supervision. And training updates, these should be as and when necessary. For example, when new legislation or new processes come into being. Low-risk food handlers should be trained to awareness level. All food handlers must know the hazards and controls relevant to their job. Refresher training should be continuous, not recertification or refresher training every 3 years. This is best achieved by on-the-job supervision or computer-based training, which is permanently available. Training must be part of the hygiene policy of a company. Prerequisites to successful training include the culture of the organisation, support of the directors, commitment of managers and supervisors, and adequate resources, for example wash hand basins and time to wash hands. The essential components of a hygiene policy include a demonstration of commitment to high standards of hygiene, company standards must be set out, dangerous practices spelled out, legal obligations outlined, commitment to train staff, and a commitment to change attitudes. And the problems or sticking points with training could be lack of finance, lack of expertise, and lack of motivation, either from the directors, managers, supervisors, or even the staff. The key points for Lecture 6 then include: most people carry food poison organisms from time to time. The role of management is securing high standards of personal hygiene and preventing contamination of food. We looked at the characteristics of protective clothing and determined that training should result in competency, not just certification. Also, the planned training is essential, and we achieve this by using a training program. Training records must be maintained. We looked at the legal requirements relating to personal hygiene and training, also staff selection, the importance of medical screening and exclusion, and also looked at the awareness of the requirements of the Department of Health guidelines, food handlers' fitness to work. Okay, to consolidate Lecture 6 on personal hygiene and training, please download the 2 following items. Firstly, the food handler controls, and try to complete that without any reference to notes and textbook, and then you can download the suggested answers. Next, download the exam questions on training, which are the Sprenger questions, where there are no defined answers. So you'll try to attempt those exam questions by yourself, again without any reference to notes or textbook. And then if you feel you're in difficulty, then by all means look at your notes and textbooks to fill in the gaps. There are no set answers to these questions, and if you do require any more detailed answers, then please feel free to email me. Next, please download question B3 on personal hygiene. Again, without reference to notes or textbook, and there are suggested answers from the CIEH which you can download once you've completed this question. And finally, please download question A2 on personal hygiene, and this is the last piece of consolidation. Again, without any reference to notes or textbook, because you will find that will help in your learning. Now, there are some suggested answers from the CIEH which you can download after you've attempted the question. So good luck with this.